Hey, mamas. Welcome back to Fun Rich Mom. I'm Mitch Blackford, and I am excited about this week because our last episode, we met Lauren and Jenn, and they are two friends that were on a surrogacy journey together. And so we started learning about how they met, what the process was like to get there, how Jenn decided to become a surrogate. And we got to right where they were about to meet the baby. And now this week we get the exciting conclusion of what went down. And boy, it wasn't just a normal everyday delivery. There was some drama that happened. And I can tell you, if I was in that situation, my heart probably would have dropped many, many times in fear of literally changing the outcome of someone's family. So today we're going to get to hear about the rest of the story. And I'm glad that you're joining us. Let's get started. Like on the other side, across the country, not being able to see her while the baby's growing, everything is just through pictures, text, I'm sure. Well, I don't know. Did we have FaceTime 8 years ago? I can't remember, but maybe Skype.
Yeah, we might have, but I'm not an Apple person. I know that was always like,
oh, there you go.
Oh! Yeah. Never had an Apple phone, anti-Apple, but anyway.
That's a whole other episode.
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely difficult. But honestly, it was difficult in theory, but in real life, I don't really think it was that difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll say though that when we visited for the first anatomy exam, that was when it hit me like a ton of bricks. Because then there's this person in front of you that's carrying your child. They're sitting there. It's real. You're seeing everything on the screen, and you're getting told like what the potential problems are. And everything was super. I'm just saying from my perspective.
Yeah.
Everything was very clinical in like how a doctor would deliver things. There wasn't any softening because there were some issues that I had never heard of, or, I mean, one of them I had, but the other two I hadn't. And I was kind of lost in translation. And I have Jenn saying, oh, yeah, I totally know it. She knew because she's been through it. Mm-hmm. And I have my ex that's like, yep, everything's fine. And I felt like my voice was very lost in that conversation. And if I had to do things differently, I would have done things differently. I would have been a lot more vocal and asked questions and not let my emotions take over. But I was really, that visit was monumental for me. And then right after that visit, we went into the tour of the hospital, right, Jenn? Like we went right into the tour of the hospital with a social worker, because you also have a social worker that represents you as an intended parent of a surrogate. And they kind of walk you through the whole, like, what's going to happen. And, and the very first thing she brought us to was the NICU.
Oh.
Like saying, if something goes wrong. And I was just like, ah! For me, that was I couldn't handle it emotionally. It was so much, but I still had to put on a face. And so I think I would just recommend that people if they're going through this process and you're an intended parent and also a surrogate, I mean, just be prepared that there's a lot of like clinical steps that the people that are helping you through it, who are great, they're not factoring that in. They're not factoring the emotional part in. Like that's up to you to figure out as you're going through it. And I was just not prepared for that.
Now there's like so many moving parts to this. Was this, this was something I would imagine the clinic advised you on, hey, you're going to need this, this, and this, and this, and this? Or was this something you kind of just like, as you got to one point, oh, where's your social worker? What do you mean social worker? You need a social worker. Was it laid out for you so you knew everything that needed to happen? Or were there any kind of surprises?
I think that
yeah, go ahead.
That came from your legal team, didn't it?
Legal team. Yeah. Because once Jenn was pregnant, I think then you kind of got handed off to the hospital, like from our clinic. Like I
Yeah,
don't
I was
know
handed
how.
off to my doctor, and it
Yeah,
was
your
like
doctor.
I was just pregnant over here, taking care of
Mm.
myself, taking care of the baby, like
So
it
it
was
was
my
really,
child.
yeah, it was really the legal team that was like, this is the next step. This is the next step. This is the,
Okay.
and because
Yeah.
it wasn't only that, but like not only I mean, this was part of that thing that Jen had to sign in that other county, but like one of the parts of that agreement was that there, like, if need be, we had to have a court appoint somebody to show up if Jen was refusing to give up the baby. So like literally a bailiff, like, or a police officer had to be there or had to be on call just in case. So we
Yeah.
were like, yeah.
Wow.
And so all of that was handled by the legal team of all these parts. So the
Okay.
social worker, that like court thing. Was there another part that I'm missing?
Remember, if for some reason I went early and you were not here to take custody of the child, if I was willing and able to take the baby home until you got here.
That's
That had to
right.
be in there too, because otherwise the social worker it would go into a like temporary foster home until
It would
you
go
could.
into a foster home.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
something you don't even think of. That's
Well, I mean, you
crazy.
don't normally have a surrogate that's 3,000 miles away.
Yeah.
So, the international ones, yeah, absolutely. But this was a little bit more on the, like, they planned to be here well in advance, but knowing that I was always early with my children, so the odds of me delivering early with her were pretty high. And so they
Yeah.
came, gosh, were you here like 3 weeks before the
You
due
were here
date?
Oh,
about
wow.
We were here about 2 weeks before you delivered. Yeah, about almost two and a
Yeah.
half.
So, yeah. So, well, she was
Oh,
born
wow.
a week early. So they had been here 2 weeks before, patiently waiting. And Lauren was attending all of my, I had to go in because I had diabetes. I had to go in like every other day
Yeah,
for
that's right.
the scans. And so Lauren
Oh,
would
my
sit there and
gosh.
she's like, wait, are you having like, she's watching the monitor, like, is that a contraction? And I'm like, yes. And I'm like, stop looking at the camera or the computer. Put your hand, it's right here. Or I would move her hand around so she could feel
Yeah.
like, at
Oh,
that point,
good.
she was not kicking. She was pushing, like her feet were pushing. And I'm like, your
Yeah.
feet are right up here. Put your hand here. So trying to get her to feel the baby move. And every time she put her hand on me, because her hands are so cold, the baby would like shut
Yeah.
up.
Like, I swear it was just moving.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Oh, so that's good. So you got to be there. You were there for the
Yeah.
birth.
Yeah.
So
Oh
then
yeah.
now the baby is born. What happens? Now, you're in the delivery room or no?
Lauren
Yeah.
was
No,
there.
we were.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was there. Yep.
Okay. Was
So
your
it's
ex in there
her.
as well?
Yeah.
He was. He
I
had
still
the
think they
opportunity
did
to be there,
Yeah.
but I don't even honestly. I don't even think if it was me, he would have been there.
Yeah. And now was
It's just,
Courtney in there?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Courtney
Yeah,
was
he was there.
awesome.
I
Oh.
told him you're the videographer for the whole entire process. So take pictures, take video. Lauren and I had an entire plan laid out. I said, look, if it goes according to how my other deliveries have gone, it's going to go quick. I think her father-in-law had flown in like that day. So he was coming to the hospital to meet me while I'm in labor. And by the time my water broke and Anime was born, it was 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
So it was very, very short time frame. So I got to the hospital within the hour, got to the room within an hour after that, and then 2 hours later, she's here. So he came in and I told her, I said, look, I'm going to tell you, like, when I can no longer talk through my contractions, that's time to get people out of the room and get into your, scrubby yoga pants and whatever, because, it's go time.
You're done. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember telling her, he's got to go, you need to change, and then half an hour later, she was there.
Fast.
So it was fast.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
And then,
funny side note,
sorry, go ahead.
sorry, Mitch.
No, you're
Lauren,
good.
do you remember our, so I would call Lauren during those 2 weeks that she was here, and every day I would call her, she would panic thinking that it was go time.
Now?
And she's like, we're in LA at the Queen Elizabeth exhibit. We can't, or whatever it was you guys were doing. You were like sightseeing, I think, one day. And she's like, no, it can't be today. And so we had to establish early on a password. Do you remember what the password was, Lauren?
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't remember? It was from Seinfeld.
What was it?
Tiptoe.
Oh, Tippy Toe.
Tippy Toe.
Tippy Toe from Seinfeld. Yeah.
So when my water broke, I remember I was in the house. My husband had just gone in the backyard. The child locks are on the back door. So my son is, Ryan was just turning 2. So Lucas was like 3.5. And I was standing in the middle of the living room and my water broke. And I'm like, oh. I ran to the bathroom and my 3-year-old was like, Mommy, you're not supposed to pee your pants, because he was trying to turn me right. So, buddy, could you please go get Daddy? But the child locks were on the door, so he's like back there, like trying to get out of the door, and I'm like, this isn't gonna work. So I had to grab it like a towel and like waddle out in the living room and open the door. And I said, Honey, you need to call Lauren because it's time. And he's like, Yahoo! And when he called her, I told her, I'm yelling from the bathroom, tell her Tippy Toe. But he knew it was. We weren't kidding with her. It was really go time. And then the mad scramble for everybody to get to the hospital ensued. So yeah,
I do remember her being so annoyed that we were in LA for that. It's not the Guggenheim, because I know that's in New York. But what's the big one in LA? The big fancy museum.
There's a couple.
I can't. I know. I'm like, I can't even think of.
It's
I
like
used to
up
live
on
there.
a hill, and it's.
The Getty.
The Getty.
Thank you.
The Getty.
Yep.
Yes, I'm like, I know it starts with a G.
It's in Malibu. Yeah.
So he wanted to go to that museum. I'm like, I really don't think this is a good idea. It's like you don't. I know you don't understand South California or Southern California traffic, but it's nuts. And I'm like, if she calls and no, we're going. I'm tired of waiting around. We've been sitting around for a week and a half now. Blah, 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 blah.
I can understand.
So we go, and thankfully she didn't call, but we're sitting in traffic and he is just bitching up a store. This traffic is ridiculous. I'm like,
Well, getting out of Malibu, yeah.
I was like,
Yes.
Could you imagine if she would have called? So yeah, that was when I said to him, I'm like, we're not leaving town after this. Like, cause the whole time I was like stressed out. Like, what if she calls? Cause I knew what the traffic was like he just wouldn't listen, but whatever. But yeah, that's so funny. I remember that when she called, and it was exciting. And I mean, the other funny thing too, is that even my father, they rushed out there also, my mom and dad, for the birth. And about a week in, my dad was like, well, this is just taking too long. And they were like, he's like, we're just going to go back to Orlando and then we'll fly back when she goes into labor. And my mom was like, I swear to God, if you get on a plane, like my mom was the one that was like, we're staying. Well, men just,
It's different.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to the delivery room. Anime comes out. First one to hold the baby.
They took her and put her up on my chest just to wipe her off. And then I think it was like maybe a minute or two, and they passed her off to you. I was like, I don't need this. Take her away. So yeah, they initially did put her up on my chest just to, cut the cord and wipe her, start wiping her around and get her a blanket and everything. But other than that, maybe a minute or so, and then Lauren had her.
Yeah. She was past me pretty quickly. Yeah. And I will say that we chose not to know the gender.
Oh, that's
right.
And so that was amazing. And probably if I was able to have 5 kids more or whatever, I would do it every single time. Not knowing the gender was so much fun.
Really?
It was so much fun. And so when she came out and she twisted and turned and I could see her genitals, I was like, it's a girl! And I just started running around the delivery room. I was like, yes.
I didn't know either. Like they specifically asked that I not find out so that I wouldn't accidentally slip up and say something. So every time I would say, oh, he or she, and I'm like, listen, I've had 2 boys, so it's always a he for me. Okay.
Uh-huh.
But I couldn't find out either. So it was a surprise to everybody.
It was a surprise.
Wow.
And I will say, Jen did say from the beginning that the pregnancy felt very different from her boys. But she went back and forth a lot. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
About what she felt like it was, but we all chose not to know. And so I would say I would recommend that. It's so much fun. I know that a lot of parents want to do the whole gender reveal and they want to do all the, planning of the nursery, but there's just something very special to just welcoming a new life into your world where you're not even thinking about any of that. It's just a new, beautiful life. So I was just it was just exciting. So,
so then did you have a hospital room to stay overnight with the baby and she was in your room, or Jen, how did that work out? Cause I know when we had our baby, they I was like, I got to take care of her tonight.
They had their own room with her across the hall from me, actually. So I was in my own room. They had their own room, and baby was in there. I was trying to pump. That was a disaster, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. And what was that first night like for you, Lauren?
I mean, it was wonderful. I mean, Anime had the common problem of jaundice. So that was kind of like, I couldn't hold her because she was under these lights and she was so uncomfortable. Poor little thing, like moving around and stuff. And, but I mean, there was, and I don't know how much Jen wants to go into this or not, but there was some trauma that happened before we were all settled. And so there was just a lot of stress that was going in, like after the birth, but before getting settled into our rooms. And so, I mean, there was just, we were already on like edge, I think, all of us.
Yeah.
Family, everybody, Courtney, everybody.
Yeah. I think you didn't really get to enjoy that first night normal because they were worried about me because I was in surgery because I always joke that Anime ripped me a new one, but yeah, she definitely caused some trauma that required immediate surgery. And it was 4 or 5. I think she was born at 6:30, 6 o'clock, something like that the night before. And I was in surgery until I was in the surgical suite until like 4 or 5 in the morning. So,
wow.
Yeah. But I was in my bed awake by the time their door opened, and I think your parents came to visit, and your mom tried to give me a stern look from the doorway. And I was like, I'm fine. But yeah, there was definitely concern that was going on that night. But yeah. And I remember too, in the delivery room, Lauren standing there holding her newborn child that she's gone through all of this to get. And we'd had the conversation several times that, what if something happened to me? And she's like, I don't want to leave Courtney and the boys without you. And thus the life insurance policy and some other things that happened. But to the fact that she was standing there holding her child and she was like hand over her mouth, trying not to scream because I was 3 shades of gray and they weren't sure what was happening. And I remember you saying, she's like, oh my God, I killed their mom. And yeah, so it was scary.
It was really scary. We did the, like when they put the baby under the light to keep the baby heated and warm, and they do the blood prick of the foot, and all of a sudden Jen is like, I don't feel good. And the nurses were like, I think the head nurse's name was Sherry. I remember certain weird details. And Sherry was like, oh, she's fine. It's probably because she didn't have an epidural. So she's now starting to feel the effect, like the pain, the effects. And then everyone turned away. And then we did the clipping of the umbilical cord when they're lying there, like, which I never remember Brian, my ex, doing. And sorry. And then Jen's like, I'm not feeling good. Hello. She was very like, aware of herself, like aware, like I'm not feeling hello. And so again, everyone turned to her. And then within maybe like 5 seconds, her monitors went berserk. Everything
Oh,
went
wow.
off, and and all the nurses like went into action, and they pulled her. They looked at her tent, and there was just blood everywhere.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so Sherry grabbed Anna Mae and almost tossed her to me like a football. And I was just like, and she goes, sit on that bench and make sure she stays pink. And like
Oh,
she
wow.
hit me the lights, like make sure she stays pink. And if she's not pink, let me know. And so I backed up, and that's when my ex left. He was like, see ya. He left. And I looked, I'll never forget looking at Courtney. And as I sat down on this bench, and Courtney's like, he was cool as a cucumber. He was like, she's going to be fine. She's going to be fine. And I was like, I was just freaking out. I was freaking out. And so they all like rushed around Jen, and then they were like, they contacted her doctor. So it was Memorial Day weekend. So her doctor had come in for the birth and then left. So they had to text. Is that correct? That's what I recall.
He had left. It was shift change. She left, and then the on-call doc was there.
Right. Afterwards. So they had to call your doctor back, right?
They come back. Yeah.
Yeah. And so she had to go down for surgery for whatever. We didn't know what was wrong at the time. When I remember what was wrong is that he or she didn't get all the placenta out.
Yeah, it tore, and it was huge. So they didn't realize that it was in pieces. So they didn't realize that it didn't get it all
broken. Okay,
Yeah.
I knew there was something about the placenta, and so I just until Anna Mae's screaming her head off, and I'm looking at her under the lights, going, I don't know, is she pink? I'm like, is she pink? So it was a very it was stressful because and then Jen, didn't you tell me that you remember my mom making a scene?
No, you told me she made a scene at the counter. Yeah. I
just remember my mom making a scene outside the door saying, I need to go in there and see what's going on. Because my mom and Jen
5'2".
Yeah.
Yeah. Sassy New Jersey woman. Yeah. I demand. Yes.
It was a scene. So it was just stressful. So they ended up putting us, I think that's one of the reasons they ended up putting us across from each other is because Jen was recovering and we were right there, and Anna Mae had to stay because of jaundice. And then they also said she might have had a heart problem, so she had to go into the the NICU to have her echogram done. They were worried about some kind of murmur.
And was she okay?
Yeah, she was okay, thankfully.
Good.
Well, I remember waking up, and the first, because Lauren alluded to it when we went to the anatomy scan, there was the little black dot that was on her, I think on her liver, which can sometimes, one dot is nothing normally, but 2 dots normally can indicate Down syndrome. So they were kind of stressed about that leading from the 20-week mark all the way up to the birth. And I remember waking up in the surgical suite, and I looked at my husband and I said, and she's okay, right? No Downs. And he's like, oh yeah, baby's fine. And I was like, okay, good. But that was the first thing I asked when I woke up, because I remember us being so worried about it that, I was like, okay, the baby's good, right? And everybody's good. He's like, you just had surgery.
Let's just focus on you. We're good.
Yeah, you're fine too, by the way. And I'm like, oh yeah, well, yeah, I figured, but.
Well, women are very different than men in that respect, I think, yeah.
So then did you leave the next day? You were able to leave, and I take it because you said at the hotel, on a side conversation we had, you were at the hotel and you came to visit with your boys and family to see the baby, right?
So that was Saturday she was born, and then did you I remember going into surgery and telling the doctor, my son's birthday is on Monday. I better be home. But I went home Monday, and I think, did you guys go home Sunday or Monday morning? No, you were there when I left, I think.
No, we were
You
there.
still
Yeah.
there.
So I know that anime was 5 days old when we flew.
Mm.
Because I think it was the day before, it was Wednesday when we went to the hospital then, because you left Thursday. Yeah. Yeah, so I got home Monday, and then Wednesday we went to the hospital, or went to the hotel.
Hotel, yeah, not hospital, yeah. They came to the hotel and took pictures with the baby, and
and then they left Thursday. And then the crazy part was, it was Thursday that I never had postpartum with my boys, but it hit me like a ton of bricks that Thursday when they left. And I don't know if it was because necessarily of the postpartum, or because it's hard to say. I hate to say that the attention was no longer on me, but during the whole process, and when I was doing the psych eval, the evaluator even said she recommended getting like a surrogate support group, because there are issues that pop up and questions that pop up that I might not know the answers to. And so I found a great Facebook group of surrogates that really helped me through that particular part of the journey, because I said, I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't stop crying. And they're like, well, honey, you got to remember, you were communicating with these parents on almost a daily basis leading up to the birth. And then it all of a sudden stopped, because they're focusing on the baby, which is where the focus should be. It's not on me and the baby anymore. It's on the baby, because it's not in me. And they said, it's normal for you to feel that way, but it was all, I felt abandoned in a way, but it wasn't, I was like, oh, well, now that I recognize that's what it is, it was easy to dismiss, but it was something that, I had to address and work through, because I didn't realize that was going to happen. So if anybody's thinking about doing surrogacy, I definitely make sure that you have a support group on hand for the entire journey, because you'll have questions, you have emotions, and it's a life inside of you that you can't deny. You're going to have feelings for it, but
and I would imagine that was maybe some of it too, is just the fact, even though you were certain and you knew this is not my child and had no problems giving it to her, there's still, your body doesn't maybe know. It's like, well, where's the baby that we just pushed out? So, you know,
my hormones didn't know what my brain already knew.
Yeah. So it had some catching up to do.
On the intended parents end, I would say be aware of that. Like if it is a surrogate that you have a relationship with, that it's not like a contractual thing where as soon as it's over, like you don't know who they are, and then as soon as it begins and ends, it's over. We didn't, like, we're friends. So I would say if it's a relationship that you have it's going to be an ongoing relationship with, pay attention to that, because I don't think I did a good job at that. I think I was just so focused on.
Which you should have been.
Well, in hindsight,
and having
done a better job at that.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but me realizing how busy you were at that point, because now you're focused on a newborn and it's your first child. I remembered the oh my God feeling when you first bring your newborn home, and especially you were traveling with a newborn and trying to settle into the new house, and the whole process. Just to go back to the question about whether or not it's worse or better to have a surrogate that doesn't live near you, Lauren and we talked about that too, and you said it was kind of better for your relationship, because you guys were able to kind of refocus on you and not so much on this ever-pressing issue that you're having with, can we conceive a child and have a family, because that part was taken care of. So for the next 9 months, you got to focus on the two of you and getting the house ready, and maybe not being so stressed out about the impending child that you're bringing home, because that was being handled somewhere else. I don't know if I say that correctly.
No, absolutely. I think that's 100% right. Like, I definitely think that was something. I just think for us, just for our specific situation, it came a little bit too late, because we had been going through it for so long. But it definitely was a nice release, like a relief / release to have Because I mean, honestly, I knew that our baby, whether it was a boy or girl, was in good hands. Like I knew it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I
Yeah.
knew them so enough to know like the way she was with her boys, and I was like, oh, she's got this. Like
Aw.
she's.
No problem.
I mean, even now, she's like my surrogate mom. Like if I ever died, she'd be the one. That I would call,
Right.
you
You're
know?
going back.
Yeah,
So
I'd be on call.
yeah.
Well, and that also was in the contract that if anything were to happen to the two of you, Courtney and I were the de facto adoptive parents.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a big one. That's huge.
I mean,
So to kind
if
of
you look
wrap,
at a
oh, go ahead.
standard, sorry, I mean, if you look at a standard surrogate contract, depending on what state you're in, there's a lot of different language. I mean, I know my sister, different story, but was a surrogate in Arizona, and the child goes with the birth mother regardless of, they don't recognize, or at least they didn't 5 years ago, they didn't recognize surrogacy. California is like, no, the baby goes with the contract. So in California, it's completely different. So it just depends on what state you're in.
Yeah,
How
that's
much
a good
contract
point.
and
That's a
stuff.
really good point. Knowing the state laws, like don't do the like if anyone's considering surrogacy, don't do it on your own. You need lawyers. I know they're expensive, but even if you're in the same state, you need representation. You
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah.
Both of you do.
Yeah. So to wrap it all up, obviously, I'm sure you were elated. You had your baby. Can you give me just kind of a brief, okay, the baby's been born, it's all done. Jen, you hit some postpartum, figured out what it was, and you were able to get through that.
Mm-hmm.
And about how long did it take you to get back to normal? And then wrapping it up on your side, Lauren, what was it like just for that first little while? And then I kind of wanted to hit, if you can touch briefly on, we keep hearing my ex, my ex, my ex. And can you talk about, did that come because of this whole process, or was there other stuff that happened that led to you guys breaking up?
Gotcha.
So Jen, how long did it take you guys to get kind of back to normal and on track?
I'd say, I mean, because I was on iron supplements for a couple months, so maybe a month or two before I was back to my regular routine, regular self, family life. Everything was back to normal. I mean, like I said, once I figured out what my depression problem was, I snapped right out of it. I was like, "Stop it! That's a stupid reason for me to be upset." So it was. I mean, because that's just how I am. So I was pretty quick to bounce back after everything. Our family wasn't really impacted by the delivery, because I was back home. So it was fine. We were good.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then Lauren, what were those first few days like? And then if you can kind of finish off with.
It was so much fun. So I don't know if it was the universe working in the right way or, serendipity or whatever, or, God working in the right way. But, Anime was born, Mother's Day weekend, or no, I'm sorry, Memorial Day weekend. And I just happened to be off for the summer. I'm a professor, and I wasn't teaching that summer. Actually, I think I was teaching that summer, but they were online classes. I've never had a summer where I haven't taught, so it must have been online. And so I just happened to just have those weeks, even though I still was teaching online for 6 weeks of the summer. I had from the end of May all the way to we start here in the third week of August.
Okay.
So I had all those weeks of just her being home and not having to take maternity leave because I was still being employed. Like it was kind of really worked out nicely. And I say that because I remember the semester that she and Courtney called me to say they were pregnant with Anime. And I was walking into a class, literally walking, and I just was in tears. And my students were like, "Is everything okay?" But they knew that what I was doing. They knew what I was trying to do. And so I was like, "She's pregnant." So just having that summer was so wonderful. And not having to worry about anything. It was I'm very thankful for that. And then I got her into daycare, starting in August. And she was at that point, like 4 or 5 months old, I think.
Yeah.
And then from that point on, it was like, remember that year, Jen, was a nightmare for me because I got sick every 5 seconds.
Yeah. In anime too. Yeah.
I had like 8 ear infections. I had bronchitis,
Oh, gosh.
pneumonia. Oh, it was a nightmare.
She was sicker than a baby. It was
I was sicker than she was.
yeah.
I got everything she came home with, but it's fine. It was fine. I figured it out. It was just a really tough year in terms of physical stuff. But I mean, that is something to consider. Like you're bringing a new baby into your home, and especially if they go to any type of daycare,
you're getting it all. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, I was lucky. I had a certain amount of months home with her versus what is it typically 6 weeks with maternity leave.
We'll go with that. I know.
I was lucky. So everything, I mean, I would say, the impact of infertility is monumental on a marriage. I mean, there's no question about it. It just is. It doesn't matter how small, how big. I dealt with miscarriages also through the process. Mine is a little bit over the top because of how long it took and how many cycles we did. And then, the adding in the egg donors too, and then the surrogacy. I mean, ours is a little bit more exaggerated than most experience. But I will say that throughout the process, there were many moments where the drugs, if you're going through this, just you and your partner have to understand the impact of these drugs. They are extreme, and you don't know how you're going to react to them, and your partner certainly is not going to understand because they're not going through it. And the more involved you get into the process and the more severe your condition is, the harsher the drugs get. And expensive. We'll talk about expenses in a second. So there was one moment where there was one particular drug that I took that my ex was like, if you have to do that again, I'm going to move into a hotel, like for the month, because you're ridiculous. So my emotions were just all over the map. So then that also factors in the expense. Like this is extremely taxing, no pun intended, but it's taxing on a relationship, the finances, and how you divvy those finances up. Like I covered most of the drugs while we were married, through that process. He covered most of the cycle fees. When it got to the egg donor, that was a whole nother process we had to deal with. Like, how are we going to pay for this? I pretty much had at least 2 jobs the entire time. You just have to figure it out if it's what you want. But you also have to realize it's going to have a huge impact on the relationship.
Yeah.
Now, would I say that this is what caused the end of our relationship? No, not at all. I would say there were many other things that I ignored leading in that I should have been more aware of. But I allowed this problem, infertility, to take my distraction off of those issues. So I would just warn other women out there that don't use it as an excuse to ignore what else is going on.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll say is that once my daughter was born, that's when she became the reason for me changing the life. I was not going to allow her to be raised in that environment that was happening. So, so in one way it was a miracle, like she's, the reason I made that decision to change and give her a different view of life than what she would have only seen if it was just the 2 of us.
Right.
So, you know, this is just my individual situation. I would not apply it to everybody else, but I would say that if you're going through this, just be aware of those factors. Like, I think one of the reasons I pursued having a child so dramatically was because one of the conversations I had with my ex was, if we don't have children, then what?
Mm,
And the answer I got was not fulfilling.
got it.
So,
Wow.
you know,
That is huge.
but then
Well,
I didn't
yeah.
realize that I wanted the child so much until
So
she
much.
arrived. And then
I
I was
know.
like,
It just changes everything, huh?
oh, she's amazing.
Aw,
She's pretty cool. So,
that's cool. And then you guys have maintained a relationship, obviously. And so Anna Mae knows all about Jenn, and
Oh,
Jenn's
yeah.
family knows Anna Mae. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I went out
That's really
there
cool.
for her first birthday. Yeah. I flew out
Aw.
to Florida for her first birthday. And then last
it was 2
Christmas?
Christmases ago.
Yeah, 2022. Yeah. Lauren and Anna Mae flew out here to California and spent Christmas with us. So, yeah.
That's
She got the
awesome.
boys.
Yeah.
Aw.
Yeah.
It was their first time really being introduced to a more of a girly girl.
Well,
Yeah, that just, I remember because she was sitting on the couch watching like Spirit and Barbie, and the boys were like, "What the heck is
what is
this?"
this?
Yeah, it's funny. Yep.
That's awesome. Well, I want to thank both of you, first of all, for being so transparent and literally just bearing it all. I mean, literally, I can't even think of anything that you didn't touch on that my mind wasn't like, well, what was this like? What was this like? And I know the first time that I got to talk to you guys and hear about it, I'm sure that anyone listening to this is going to feel the same way. It's just so eye-opening because you hear about it and you wonder, but to go through that process step by step and the amount of process that is involved with it, I had no idea. Like you started telling, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can only imagine
We
the
didn't
checklist.
either. Yeah.
Yeah, which is probably in a way was, ignorance was bliss going into it, because if you had known in advance, it might have stopped you. But you guys pursued on, and it's just such a beautiful story. And I hope, like Jenn, we had the conversation about how sometimes people would not be very nice to you because of you being a
Yeah.
surrogate.
Yeah.
And I hope this opens people's eyes to to the fact that you're not some unfeeling woman that's just like, here's the baby, have it. And that
Yeah.
it didn't affect you, because I think that's the furthest thing from the truth. It's just that you have such a capacity for your friend and a heart to say, you know what, I have this beautiful blessing and I can pass it on. And just the fact that you would do that is outstanding. And how you were there and you pushed through and you believed in this, Lauren, that is some true grit, because I don't know how long I would have lasted.
It's you never say no until it's a no, until it's a hard no. And I share in Jenn that, like, in her experience, that I heard a lot of BS from people too.
Yeah.
About what I was doing.
Yeah.
I bet.
Even from close family members. So
yeah. I mean, it's amazing that we're in 2024 and people honestly still think that in vitro babies are not real.
Yeah.
Like, they're not real children. It's like, well, they sure felt real when I pushed them out, and they sure didn't sound real.
I know. Every time I pinch my kid, they say, "Ow."
Yeah. So it's hard to believe that a lot of people still have that mentality. But then also, like you said, the people that would say, "Oh, I could never give up the baby," and I'm like, "Well, I'm not a monster. It's not like I don't recognize that it's a child that needs a loving home, but it's not my child. It's not my home that it's going to live in." So. Yeah.
In that, I just want to say, in that vein, I wanted to mention that, and this was important to me, and I'm sorry I didn't bring it up earlier. If anyone's listening who's interested in this process, whether it's IV or surrogacy or egg donor, whatever it is, or all combined, or even adoption, it's really important that you think about how you're going to explain this to your children. And I mean everybody involved, like Jenn's boys, and like how, and family members. How do you explain this to people? but mainly to the kids because they're the ones that matter. Like family members, if they can't accept it or get over it, then I have no patience for that. Seriously, I just don't. But when it comes to family members and I mean, when it comes to children, and I will say that because we also had to go through the psychological process screening when it came to egg donor. And one of the best pieces of advice that I got from the second evaluator, the first evaluator, the second evaluator, when we went through the egg donor process was, don't ever lie to the kids about where they came from, and be honest with them. And so what our question was, well, how do you be honest with them without it being traumatic? And she said the worst thing you can do is to pick a time in life and be like, we need to talk to you. Like when they're like 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, they said the best thing you can do is build it into their birth story. So they don't know, they can't pinpoint a time when they were told. They just know.
Right. They've just always known.
They've just always known. And so in our baby book, like Jen and the family is a part of our baby book. Like we have pictures of her everywhere. Anime knows, obviously Anime's met Jen, but she knows that she grew in Jen's belly. We're working now on the concept of egg donor. We're working on that. That's a little bit harder for Anime to grasp now because of her age, but she's starting to get it. But one of the, I thought, great analogies that the psychologist gave us was the cooking analogy that, mommy didn't have all the ingredients she needed. So she needed to go to like a special store for the oven, and she needed to go to a special store for the eggs, and she needed to go, and then we put it all together, and then you came, so I just thought that was really important that, and here's why here's just a scientific reason why it's so important not to lie. If your child grows up and has some kind of genetic disease that can't be attributed to the family, or some kind of disease that can't be attributed biologically or genetically, how are you going to explain that? And what if they do one of these genetic tests, like the
23andMe or Ancestry.com? Yeah,
exactly. How are you going to explain that?
Yeah.
And so I just think that's what was really the moment. I never would have lied to Anime to begin with because I tell everybody everything. So there's no way this is a secret.
Right.
But I just thought that's really something to think about, that instead of framing it in something that was wrong, frame it in something that was beautiful.
Yeah. That's, obviously not the surrogacy, but with the in vitro, I can't remember a time when my girls didn't know.
Because you'd be surprised how many people that I tell this story to assume that Jen is Anime's biological.
Yeah.
I get that all the time. I'm like, no, because they don't understand what egg donor is not as understandable as surrogacy and IV, I think.
Yeah.
So I have to be like, no. So like, wait, so it's you and somebody else and Jen
and somebody else.
I have no genetic tie to Anime whatsoever.
Yeah.
Neither do I. So that makes 2 of us.
But you're doing a great job being a mama.
She's mine.
As I knock my water over.
She's mine.
Yes. That's awesome.
She couldn't mimic me more with her mannerisms.
Yeah. It's the total case of nature versus nurture over there, because that little girl is her mama, like 100%.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that is awesome. All right. Well, again, thank you so much, both of you guys. Seriously, this has been so eye-opening and like an emotional roller coaster. You guys almost had me in tears a couple of times too. And I just know that there's going to be someone that listens to this and you're going to be the answer to their questions. And it's going to be just soul refreshing. So thank you. Thank you again for being so transparent and so willing to share this story. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So with that, you guys, you're free to go. Wow. I don't know about you, but after listening to all of that, my mind is literally still just reeling from everything that these two women were willing to go through to make sure that Lauren and Anna Mae ended up together as a mother and daughter. And I am so thankful for people like Jen who step up to do something that most of us probably wouldn't. And to be honest, that I had judgments about before because I just didn't really understand the process. And to know that she did go through a lot of that with people approaching her and letting her know that they thought how wrong she was to do something like that. And yet here we are on the other side and see what a gift that it created. So I appreciate their raw vulnerability. I appreciate that they were willing to just tell every single bit of the story so that, we could get our curiosity satisfied and so that we could understand more of what this process is about. And for anyone who is currently in that struggle, have a better picture of what that whole journey might look like. Right? Big breath. Other than that, we will be returning next week. And I am so grateful that you have stuck around and that you have been checking out these podcasts. Like I said, it does mean the world to me. You're the reason that I'm here. Really, if it wasn't for you, I have no point in doing this. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. If I hadn't said it enough, thank you so much. And I would love your help in trying to get the word out on this podcast so that more people can hear stories like this and the other interviews that we bring to this. And if you would be so kind as to leave a review on whatever podcast player it is that you listen to, apparently that helps this show get a little more discoverable. Same with YouTube as well. Or you can even just forward it to a friend right now. Like click right now, forward to a friend, and they can listen to it and find out about it. So thank you again so much. And with that, make it fun, make it rich, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.